right, Todd, you got the results?
Yeah, and they're very, very interesting.
And what we see here is embedded bones on the wall.
Deep in the Guatemalan jungle, a blood-red wall lay hidden for over 2,000 years. Covered in skeletons, serpents, and strange symbols, no one could read it until now. In 2025, experts finally cracked the code, and what they found is terrifying. Predictions of a blood moon, famine, and collapse that match our world today.
This has happened in the past, and I believe the Mayans were saying to us, this is happening again.
Is this prophecy, lost science, or a warning carved in stone for us to find? Join us. The Death Wall Decoded. Buried in the heart of Guatemala's jungle, hidden beneath a massive pyramid sealed for more than 2,000 years, a revolutionary discovery was made. Behind thick stone walls, an underground chamber was uncovered, painted entirely in a blood-red pigment that gave the space an almost unnatural glow. Skeleton figures stretched across the walls, holding obsidian blades sharp enough to cut through bone, and serpents with gaping jaws appeared to swallow stars whole. More than 200 carved symbols were scattered across the surface, glyphs unlike anything experts had ever seen before. For years, no one could read them, and the mystery only grew. Was this simply a chilling work of ancient art, or was it a coded warning left behind for the future? Could it be that this wall contained a prediction about an event thousands of years ahead of its time? The chamber itself seemed designed to keep secrets. Tucked away under layers of stone, the air inside was heavy and still, as if the room had been waiting in silence for millennia. Unlike other Maya murals that celebrated victories, gods, or creation myths, this one felt darker. The imagery suggested violence, sacrifice, and cosmic disruption, and the glyphs looked different from later Maya writing systems, making them impossible to decipher with the usual methods. Scholars could only speculate. Some suggested it was a tomb marker, others thought it documented human sacrifice, while a few dared to wonder if it might be a prophecy about the heavens. Yet none of these guesses could be proven, because without the ability to read the glyphs, the wall remained an indecipherable puzzle. Everything changed in the year 2025 when a team led by David Stewart, one of the world's foremost experts in Maya writing, decided to take a new approach. Instead of relying only on human expertise, they brought in artificial intelligence to tackle the problem. They trained algorithms on every known source of Maya writing, including the 3 surviving codices, the Dresden, Madrid, and Paris books, ancient bark paper manuscripts that had somehow survived the Spanish burning of Maya texts. The AI was also fed fragments from nearby murals, such as those found at San Bartolo and Sultun, to give it a wider base of early symbols to compare against. By analyzing patterns, repetitions, and structural similarities, the system began to identify recurring elements and possible meanings that humans had struggled to recognize. This hybrid approach worked better than anyone expected. Within months, the team was able to decode nearly 60% of the Death Wall's glyphs. What they found was astonishing. Several recurring phrases stood out immediately: blood eclipse, turning of the bones, and serpent's coil. Each term carried heavy symbolic weight, but together they painted a picture that was both vivid and unsettling. The blood eclipse appeared to describe a total lunar eclipse, a moment when the moon turns a deep red as it passes into Earth's shadow. The turning of the bones was harder to interpret, but experts suggested it referred to a cosmic reset, a time of death, transformation, and renewal, often linked with ancestor rituals. The serpent's coil was likely a reference to a celestial event, such as a comet, or the alignment of planets, visualized as a giant snake moving across the sky. The decoded text suggested that these symbols were not random. They were part of a larger narrative about the relationship between the heavens and the fate of the people on Earth. In one section, the glyphs described the moon bleeding in the serpent's jaws, a poetic way of describing a blood-red moon accompanied by an unusual event in the stars. Another portion linked this eclipse to the end of a great calendar cycle known as a Baktun, a period in the Maya long count system, equivalent to more 144,000 days. In Maya culture, the close of such a cycle was not merely a calendar marker. It was a time of upheaval, when worlds could collapse and begin again. Even more startling were the warnings embedded in the wall. The glyphs hinted at rituals involving heart offerings, almost certainly referring to sacrifices made to honor gods during moments of cosmic danger. They spoke of drought, famine, and collapse, describing silent fields and darkened sun, phrases that conjure images of a society brought to its knees by natural and celestial forces working together. Two deities were named, Kinich Ahau, the sun god, and Ixchel, the moon goddess, both central to Maya religion. The implication was clear. These cosmic events were not just astronomical curiosities. They were signs of divine displeasure, warnings that disaster was imminent unless balance was restored. Here is where the discovery becomes truly unsettling. The predicted blood eclipse described on the wall corresponds exactly to a real event. A total lunar eclipse scheduled for the year 2025, visible in Guatemala. Modern astronomical data from NASA confirms its timing and visibility. Somehow, over 2,000 years ago, the Maya had calculated this event with an accuracy that rivals today's science. How could a pre-industrial civilization, without telescopes or modern instruments, predict such a thing so precisely? Was it the result of centuries of observation, with astronomer priests recording every cycle of the moon until they could forecast its behavior far into the future? Or does the wall represent something more mysterious, perhaps a message passed down from knowledge we have since lost? The shock only deepens when you realize what this implies. If the Maya could foresee a specific lunar eclipse thousands of years ahead, then their astronomical knowledge was not only advanced, but systematic and deeply mathematical. The Dresden Codex already demonstrated that they tracked Venus cycles and eclipse seasons with astonishing precision. But the Death Wall suggests this capability existed centuries earlier than historians believed. The idea that such knowledge was present during the pre-classic period rewrites the timeline of Maya science and raises uncomfortable questions. The eerie accuracy of the eclipse prediction forces us to confront a mystery. Was the Death Wall truly a prophecy meant to warn of cycles of destruction and renewal? Or are we interpreting their message through the lens of our own fears? Ancient knowledge, lost and rediscovered. When researchers announced in 2025 that they had finally cracked large portions of the Mayan Death Wall's writing, the academic world erupted in disbelief. For decades, the glyphs had defied translation, dismissed by some as decorative or symbolic beyond recovery. And yet, artificial intelligence, working alongside human expertise, had revealed clear references to eclipses, disasters, and cycles of time. This was not simply an archaeological breakthrough. It was the recovery of knowledge thought to be lost forever. How could a civilization that thrived more than 2 millennia ago create a writing system so complex that only now are we beginning to read its earliest forms? And why did so much of this knowledge vanish in the first place? The Maya writing system was one of the most sophisticated in the ancient world. It combined more than 800 glyphs, some representing entire words, and others functioning more like syllables that could be combined to form complex expressions. This mixture of phonetic and symbolic writing allowed the Maya to record everything from royal genealogies and political events to astronomical calculations and religious myths. However, when the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they saw these texts not as records of scientific and cultural achievement, but as dangerous expressions of a so-called pagan faith. Spanish missionaries, especially Diego de Landa in the Yucatan, carried out campaigns of destruction, burning vast numbers of Maya books and erasing centuries of accumulated knowledge. Out of what may have been thousands of manuscripts, only 3 codices survived intact: the Dresden, Madrid, and Paris codices. the scale of this loss is difficult to comprehend, because what we hold today is just a fraction of what once existed. The challenge for modern scholars has therefore been immense. Imagine trying to reconstruct the history, science, and spirituality of an entire civilization with only 3 partial books and scattered inscriptions carved on stone. For centuries, the glyphs resisted understanding, until the breakthroughs of the mid-20th century, when scholars like Yuri Knorozov realized that the writing system was partly phonetic, allowing progress in translation. Still, the oldest texts, like those on the Death Wall, predated these more developed systems and were far more symbolic, forcing archaeologists to admit that much of the pre-classic era remained locked in silence. It is this silence that the recent decoding has begun to break, and in doing so, it has reminded us of how much was lost to conquest and fire. The Mayan Death Wall matters not just for its shocking imagery, but for the science buried within its glyphs. The Maya were extraordinary astronomers. The Dresden Codex, written many centuries after the Death Wall, contains eclipse tables so accurate that modern astronomers have confirmed they were correct within minutes. These tables relied on identifying lunar nodes, the points where the moon's orbit crosses the sun's path, which determine when eclipses can occur. By carefully observing cycles over long periods, the Maya developed predictive models that rival those of much later civilizations. They also tracked the movements of Venus with such precision that they used its cycles to schedule wars and rituals, believing that the planet's appearance and disappearance signaled moments of great cosmic significance. Their calendar systems were equally advanced. The long count calendar, designed to cover vast stretches of time, operated in cycles of 5,125 years. This cyclical view of time is crucial to understanding the Death Wall. For the Maya, time was not a straight line with a beginning and an end. It was a repeating cycle, where death led to renewal and endings gave rise to beginnings. In this worldview, an eclipse was part of a larger rhythm that connected human lives, natural events, and cosmic forces. This cyclical perspective also shaped how the Maya approached sacrifice and ritual. To us, the images of skeletons clutching hearts or serpents consuming stars may seem purely violent, but for the Maya, these acts were part of maintaining balance in the universe. Sacrifice was not simply about appeasing gods through bloodshed. It was a way of ensuring that the cosmic order continued, that rains would fall, crops would grow, and the cycle of life and death remained unbroken. The underworld, known as Xibalba, loomed large in their myths, especially in the Popol Vuh, which described heroes journeying through trials of death and rebirth. These myths remind us that what might appear to be gruesome warnings could also be symbolic lessons about resilience, transformation, and the inevitability of change. The warnings carved into the Death Wall about drought and famine are not mere stories. Archaeological and environmental studies show that around the 9th century, long after the wall was painted, the Maya heartland suffered devastating droughts. Evidence from lake sediments in the Yucatan reveals that rainfall decreased by nearly half between the years 800 and 1000. Crops failed, reservoirs dried up, and populations were forced to abandon once thriving cities. This was not the only factor. Overpopulation, political conflict, and the breakdown of trade networks also contributed. But the environmental crisis played a decisive role. Silent fields and empty temples, as described in the wall's glyphs, were lived realities for generations who experienced collapse. What makes this even more unsettling is how closely these ancient warnings resonate with our world today. Climate change, resource scarcity, and political instability are again pressing on global societies, echoing the very conditions that contributed to Maya decline. When the Death Wall speaks of cycles, of bones turning and moons bleeding, it may not only describe ancient fears, but also recurring patterns of human vulnerability. We too rely on predictable rains, fertile fields, and stable systems, and we too risk collapse if these foundations falter. what the decoding means for us. When the glyphs of the Mayan death wall were first translated in 2025, scholars and the public immediately asked the same unsettling question. Was this prophecy or science? The decoded phrases of blood eclipse, turning of the bones, and serpent's coil seemed to describe real astronomical events alongside warnings of drought, famine, and collapse. For some, this looked like a direct prediction, a cosmic alarm meant to reach across millennia. For others, it was more likely that the Maya were describing cycles they had already observed and interpreting them through mythological language. The debate is ongoing, and it exposes how fragile the line can be between science and spirituality in the ancient world. One possibility is that what we see as prophecy was actually a record of careful astronomical observation, interpreted through religious belief. The Maya tracked lunar cycles with extraordinary precision, and they were deeply aware that eclipses often repeated according to predictable rhythms. When they paired these cycles with historical memories of drought or famine, it would make sense for them to see a blood moon as a sign of danger returning. In this way, the death wall may not have been predicting the future as much as warning that what had happened before could happen again. Another possibility is that we are projecting our own modern fears, climate collapse, food insecurity, and social instability, onto their texts. Are we reading apocalypse into their words because these are the very anxieties we face today? At the same time, the fact that modern astronomical data confirms that a lunar eclipse will indeed occur in Guatemala in 2025 raises the stakes of the debate. The accuracy of the prediction forces us to take seriously the idea that the Maya had achieved a systematic understanding of celestial mechanics far earlier than previously thought. Whether or not they meant to predict our time specifically, their calculations worked, and their words now feel like a mirror held up to our own moment of crisis. Part of the reason we are even able to have this debate today is because of modern technology. Artificial intelligence played a central role in cracking the death wall. Machine learning models trained on the Dresden, Madrid, and Paris codices were able to detect recurring shapes, patterns, and contexts that human experts had overlooked for decades. By comparing the unknown glyphs of the death wall with better understood ones from later centuries, the AI provided a statistical foundation for possible meanings. For example, it noticed repeated associations between serpent imagery and astronomical events, helping scholars identify the serpent's coil as a likely reference to a comet or planetary alignment. The opportunities this opens are enormous. If AI can decode 60% of the death wall's writing, what else might it reveal from other pre-classic sites where inscriptions remain mysterious? We could gain entirely new insights into how the earliest Maya understood time, nature, and the cosmos, and we could trace the evolution of their thought across centuries. However, there are also risks. Algorithms do not understand context in the way humans do. They see statistical similarities, but cannot always tell if those similarities are coincidental or meaningful. There is a danger of overinterpretation, where a machine-generated link is accepted as fact without sufficient evidence. Scholars must therefore use AI as a tool, not a replacement for human judgment, combining computational power with cultural and archaeological expertise. The lunar eclipse of 2025 now looms as both an astronomical event and a symbolic moment. To the Maya, cycles of time were everything. The ending of one era was not simply destruction, but also renewal. In this light, the blood eclipse could be read as a reminder that great changes come with both danger and opportunity. Should we treat it as a prophecy of disaster, or as a reminder to prepare for transformation? The wall's language of silent fields and darkened sun might indeed echo the environmental catastrophes of the past, but it can also be read as a call to resilience, to adapt before collapse overtakes us. The Maya were not mystics lost in superstition. They were scientists of their own world, recording cycles of drought, rainfall, and celestial movement with an accuracy that still surprises us today. Their warnings of famine were not vague metaphors, but responses to real environmental pressures that their society faced. The Death Wall shows us that they saw a profound link between the sky above and the earth below, and they sought to understand that link for ritual purposes as well as for survival. The fact that their civilization ultimately collapsed does not erase their achievements. Instead, it highlights the difficulty of overcoming ecological limits even with advanced knowledge. The Mayan Death Wall is therefore more than a relic of a vanished world. It is a cosmic clock that ties the cycles of the heavens to the rhythms of human life. And at the same time, it is a human message encoded in stone, meant to be remembered when the cycles came round again. We now find ourselves living through one of those cycles. The question is not whether the Maya were prophets or scientists. The real question is whether we are prepared to heed what they saw and to act before our own silent fields become a reality. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.